Hi folks, in this Rambles with Robin and Ruby video, we continue our westward travel along the Alaska Highway from the Summit Lake campground to the Muncho Lake area in the northern Rockies of northeastern British Columbia, Canada. I share with you a hike across a spectacular alluvial fan in the Muncho Lake area called the Stones Sheep Trail. The trailhead is located beside Muncho Lake along the Alaska Highway in the northern Rockies of northwestern British Columbia, Canada. Now, in my previous video, I described some key geological features of alluvial fans and the geological processes that created them. These are features that you will see as you hike across the alluvial fan along the Stones Sheep Trail. Therefore, you may find it useful to watch the previous video, as it is a geological backgrounder for those who want to understand a little more deeply what an alluvial fan is and the geological processes that created it. However, this present video focuses on our hike across an alluvial fan, includes some interesting geological features as seen through my geological eyes, and includes insights on the influence of the alluvial fan geology on the location of wild plants that I saw growing on the alluvial fan. At the end of this present video, I also include some bonus geological observations, including a disappearing creek, rocks that create acid drainage, and hoodoos. So please stay tuned until the end. Join us as we hike the Stones Sheep Trail across an alluvial fan near Muncho Lake. And we arrive at Muncho Lake, which is characterized by its lovely blue-green colored water created by suspended rock grains called rock flour. In the Muncho Lake area, we will hike part of the Stones Sheep Trail across a spectacular example of what geologists call an alluvial fan. Now, those of you who follow me know that I see the world through geologists' eyes. Therefore, in this video, I will share my geological perspectives and give you some insights to the land seen through the eyes of a geologist, including one natural example where the local geology creates acid water drainage that discourages vegetation. I will also share some of the flowering native plants that thrive in this hostile alluvial fan habitat. So join me as we drive to Muncho Lake and hike an alluvial fan. So we are in the northern Rockies. This is Stones Sheep Trail. And we're going to take a walk over an outwash. So these are areas where rivers in the mountains come rushing down a valley, and when they hit the flat land, they are carrying lots of rock and lots of fine rock flour, and they just dump it. And they dump it quickly. And this is one that is feeding into Muncho Lake, which is just a very beautiful lake with glacial rock flour suspended in the water, which gives it this interesting green color. So we'll just walk up. This is kind of a geology walk. We'll see if there's any plants, but this is a tough place for plants to grow because it gets covered with a new layer of sediment every spring. Lots of little patches of what appear to be yellow mountain-aven. The leaves are crenulated, and I think they've probably already gone into bloom. So they're past bloom. But it's an early colonizer plant that's stabilizing the soil here. There's some tiny spruce that are eking out an existence here, trying to grow in this dynamic environment, and there's some shrubby sancfoy, potentilla. It's in bud right now. And this mat of yellow mountain-aven. And you can see how floodwater in the spring, where this rushing creeks would have eroded the layer of rock on the side, and you get a sense for the size of some of the boulders that are moved by the floodwater, spring runoff, and derived from melting snow. Big thunderstorms can give you the same deluge of water and same impact. Get a rushing stream. You have to be careful hiking in these too. There's a gentleman in Fort Nelson who cautioned us if we go up up the valley, be aware because there could be an ice dam further up the valley, and those ice dams can hold back the water, making it look like it's dry and safe to walk. And then the ice dam suddenly gives way, and you're met by a cascade of torrential water and ice, which would be exciting at the very least. So here we're looking at creeping juniper. You can see its long, I wouldn't say root, but stem, branch, and the juniper is just creeping along the floor of what is an older stabilized outwash plain alluvial fan. And we have some sort of whitey cream colored entire leaved mountain-aven in bloom, and you can see its leaves are narrow, widest below the center, not strongly crenulated. We know it's an older section of the alluvial fan because you can see lots of vegetation. Maybe 25% of the surface cover is vegetation compared to what we see just on the right, which is the active alluvial fan. And that's a very difficult place for plants to stabilize because the floodwaters in the spring just completely churn up that material. Whereas this part of the alluvial fan is being stabilized by plants. And there's some bearberry, part of the stabilizing plant community. One of the factors that's really important leading to the formation of an alluvial fan is to have a valley that contains the river, the valley water. So we have mountain on one side. Up there is the source area. Those deeply incised valleys are where the rivers would be rushing down from. And on the other side, we have another valley, including some hoodoos by the looks of it, which we'll go look at, that contains the alluvial fan. And then it spreads out as it approaches the lake, where the containing mountains are more subdued, looking at Muncho Lake. You can see on the edge of the alluvial fan, the conifers are encroaching and helping to stabilize this really abandoned part of the fan. And eventually, if the inflow of the water from the valleys ahead decreased quite a bit, this forest would actually continue to encroach and eventually cover the alluvial fan. So I'm not sure if this will show up. Here's in front of us a shrubby cinquefoil, potentilla, and right beside it on the ground is something that I would call Todphelia. I have to do some looking to find out what it is. Quite lovely. It's the leaves that are suspicious to me. They look like iris leaves, wild iris. And it's sitting beside the shrubby cinquefoil. So here's a surprise. Looking at a yellow lady slipper. Oh, for some reason or other my walkie-talkie is going off. We'll fix that in a minute. So this yellow lady slipper is a plant that many consider to be calcicolous. In other words, it thrives in limey soil, calcareous soil, and all the mountains around us are limestone, and the boulders here are crushed up limestone and disarticulated limestone, so it's a calcareous environment. And we're in an area where there are lots of yellow lady slipper orchids growing on this stabilized alluvial fan. A lovely cluster here. Some bearberry also. Lapland rosebay, old name I think. It's a rhododendron, and interesting, it is a calcicolous plant. It's one of the very few, if not the only, member of the rhododendron that seek out and thrive on calcareous soil. So it's not surprising to see it here. So I'm walking up a slope, and it's just covered with bearberry, small conifers, and this. And if I were clever, I'd be able to tell you exactly what it is. But I will have to look it up to give you the name. Otherwise, I will be wrong. And I don't mind being wrong, but don't want to mislead you. And they stand out like a sore thumb. We can see them down below the hill on the alluvial fan. And they were just shining like a beacon of light at night. And some more yellow lady slipper orchids. They're just covering this hillside. Basking in the warm sun. Probably several hundred yellow lady slipper orchids on this hill. Probably almost impossible to see with this camera. Nice slope, nice sun, good calcareous soil. Approaching the edge of one of the feeder streams onto the alluvial fan, coming from a valley. We're just on the edge. You get a sense of the valley ahead of us and the alluvial fan starting to build as the stream enters this flat area where it loses some of its energy. It begins to dump its load of cobbles and rocks and rock flour. It's a low slope. So now we're looking at that feeder, looking at the alluvial fan that's built from that feeder. Very little vegetation. There's some yellow mountain-avens, just based on the shape of their leaves. As we walk over to the side, quite a bit more, but none in flower. Again, it's a very tough place to grow, because every spring this area is under flood and simply bombarded, ballistically disposed of by boulders and pebbles and grains of sand. So that's where we started our walk from the apex of the triangle on this feeder alluvial fan, fed by that river that would have come crashing through the valley up there. We're almost at the bottom of this feeder alluvial fan where it joins the main alluvial fan. And there's other valleys up there you can see And there's some water actually flowing. It has a different surface, has a different reflection. So you get a sense that there's several feeders to this massive alluvial fan here by Muncho Lake. And the ravens have gone quiet, but there is a nest. You might be lucky enough to see in this video. I'll certainly post a pic. There's white guano right below the nest. So the nest kind of stands out like a sore thumb. Not too many predators are going to get up there to get them. And this is part of the bounding wall that contains the main alluvial fan, which we're looking at now towards Muncho Lake. Deposited over maybe 10,000 years. Sheets of boulders, sand, gravels by flooding rivers. That are catastrophically flowing out of valleys like that, largely due to snowmelt, I would assume. Fabulous alluvial fan. And it still amazes me to see what geologists say poorly sorted. You've got boulders half a meter in size sitting right on top of and beside grains the size of a sand grain, and everything in between. Quite amazing. And that's where we're headed back to Muncho Lake. So we're standing here at the base of the cliff, and there's not a lot of water running from the valley onto this alluvial fan, but there's some. And yes, it is cold. It would be meltwater, snowpack meltwater. So one of the mysteries of alluvial fans is during the summer, after the floods, where does the water go? And the answer in this case is right there. So the water, the meltwater from the mountains, is actually disappearing into the really porous alluvial fan, and eventually will end up in Muncho Lake, which is just down there. One last look at the quartzite, at really a rusty area, and to me, the way that it weathers, the color, it looks like there's quite a bit of pyrite in there in places. And this is a softer layer that may have a lot of pyrite in it, but you can see the iron stain on the surface of the rock. And that iron stain, the color of it and the way that it forms, looks like there's pyrite. Layers of rock that contain quite abundant pyrite in the bottom of this quartzite exposure. We walk along this this cliff face. The rusty weather material has become really abundant, almost to the extent where I would suspect it's a completely different rock type. And as you go up, you can see the white quartzite sitting on top. It's not as rusty. There's some spots of rust in it, but not as rusty. Other interesting point is that the rust, because it looks like it's coming from iron sulfide, the rust produces, so the process of forming rust, the weathering of the rock, in other words, produces acid drainage, acid water. This is quite natural, and it's a feature of all iron sulfide bearing rocks, that when they get exposed to the air and the rain and the snow and the atmosphere, that iron sulfide mineral, usually pyrite, oxidizes, creates sulfuric acid and iron oxide. Obviously, in great concentrations, this is not very good for the vegetation, but here it's quite natural. And you'll notice there's not a lot of vegetation growing on this rock. Now that's partly because it's steep and unstable. But if you look at the steep and unstable quartzite above, there's lots of conifer trees up there, but very little vegetation growing on this acid water producing, rusty weathering, iron sulfide bearing rock. I mentioned at the beginning of the hike that I saw hoodoos along the valley wall. So let's remind ourselves what a hoodoo is. A hoodoo is a tall, thin spire of rock or loosely consolidated sediment that was formed by erosion. Hoodoos generally consist of a relatively soft rock capped by a hat of harder, less easily eroded rock. That hard hat protects each column from erosion and therefore forms a tall spire, whereas adjacent uncapped geological material is unprotected and more easily erodes away. In this photograph, you can see the small hard cap that protects this hoodoo. Hoodoos generally range in size from the height of a human being to heights that may exceed a 10-story building. With that context, let's take a look at the hoodoos that are developed along the valley wall. Along the edge of the alluvial fan are some hoodoos, and the hoodoos are made of unconsolidated rock. It looks a lot like the alluvial fan itself, so it looks like, and it's deposited right on top of rusty, weathering old rock. So you've got the old rock, you had alluvial fan, sort of the ancestral alluvial fan that was deposited on that exposed bedrock, and it was filled, probably partially filled or completely filled the valley, and then was cut through and washed away by the present alluvial fan, which is what we're sitting on here. So it gives you a sense of the erosive power of these meltwater rivers. They may not run all summer and all year, but boy, when they run, they're really powerful. And again, it's just absolutely amazing to look at the poorly sorted nature of these rocks that contain the hoodoo, that form the hoodoo. Boulders and sitting and supported by sand-sized grains. So that's a wrap for this rather long video. I appreciate that not everyone is interested in a geological perspective of an alluvial fan or the native plants that eke out an existence in this hostile habitat. But for those who do hike the Stones Sheep Trail, you will walk over and you will see these geological features and the native plants. Perhaps they may enhance your nature experience. In the next video, I will highlight some of the wild animals we saw along the segment of the Alaska Highway between Summit Lake, British Columbia and Watson Lake, Yukon. Now, if you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please consider liking the video or subscribing to this YouTube channel. Those simple actions tell YouTube there is value in this video, and that will encourage YouTube to share it with other viewers. Until then, stay well.